You know that moment when you receive a message on your phone and feel the ground disappear from under your feet? That's exactly what happened to me on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon while I was watering the violets on my apartment balcony. My son Raphael's name lit up the phone screen, and my heart did that familiar leap. That mixture of joy and anxiety that every mother feels when she sees her son's name appear. I could hardly imagine that those coldly typed words would change everything between us, that this would be the beginning of a painful journey that would make me question every choice I'd made in the last 30 years of my life. The message was short, direct, like a sharp blade cutting any possibility of dialogue. Mom, I need you to understand something once and for all. You're not going to meet your grandson. Not now. Maybe never. You're simply not worthy of being near him. I read those words once, twice, 3 times, hoping that somehow they would change meaning, that I had misunderstood. But no, each rereading only confirmed what my heart already knew. My own son was considering me unworthy of meeting my first and only granddaughter, little Alice, who had been born just 3 months ago and whom I only knew through photos sent by my daughter-in-law in the first days after birth. Let me tell you how we got here, because nothing in life happens out of nowhere, right? Every conflict has a history. Every hurt has a root that was planted at some point, sometimes without us even realizing it. My name is Helena. I'm 56 years old. I've been a widow for almost 2 decades, and I raised my son Raphael alone since he was only 9 years old. His father, my late husband Jorge, died in a car accident when he was coming home from work on a rainy winter night. I remember as if it were yesterday the police officer ringing our doorbell at 2 in the morning, the way he took off his cap before speaking, as if that gesture could somehow soften the news that was about to destroy our family. From one moment to the next, I found myself completely alone, with a small child to raise, bills to pay, and a hole in my chest that seemed to have no end. We had no life insurance, no significant savings, nothing but each other. Jorge was always a good man, hard-working, honest, but he was never very good with money or planning. He lived in the present intensely, said that tomorrow God would provide, and I believed him because I loved him. But when he was gone, tomorrow arrived cruel and relentless, bringing with it piles of overdue bills, a car loan that still had years to go, and rent that consumed more than half of what I earned as an administrative assistant in a small accounting firm. The first years after Jorge's death were the hardest of my life, waking up every day at 5 in the morning, preparing breakfast for Raphael, leaving him at my neighbor Donasida's house, who took care of him until it was time to go to school, taking 2 buses to get to work, working from 8 to 6, returning home standing on the crowded bus, picking up my son, preparing dinner, helping with homework, giving him a bath, putting him to bed, and then, only then, when the house finally fell silent, I allowed myself to sit on the couch and cry. I cried for how much I missed Jorge. I cried from the exhaustion that seemed to have entered my bones and never leave. I cried from fear of the future, from fear of not being able to give my son everything he deserved. But the next day I would wake up again, wipe away the tears, and move forward. Because that's the fate of every mother who finds herself alone in this world. You don't have the luxury of completely falling apart. You need to be strong even when there's no more strength. You need to continue even when everything inside you is screaming to stop. And I continued, day after day, month after month, year after year. I watched my son grow up, become a smart and studious boy, win medals at school, make friends, dream of being an engineer like his father. I bent over backwards so he could have everything he needed, even if it meant I had nothing for myself. When Raphael entered engineering school, it was the happiest day of my life since his birth. I had succeeded against all odds, against all difficulties, in raising a son who was entering a public university, who had a bright future ahead. But the joy was short-lived, because in the first months of classes he began to change. He met a new group, started frequenting places I had never set foot in, started talking about things I didn't understand, using words I'd never heard, and worst of all, he started to feel ashamed of me. I noticed in the way he deflected when friends asked about family, in the way he avoided introducing me to his college classmates, in the poorly disguised embarrassment when I showed up at the university to bring a document or a snack he had forgotten at home. Once, I'll never forget, I was waiting for him at the university exit because we had agreed to go together to solve something at the bank. And when he came out, accompanied by 3 colleagues, and saw me standing there, his face changed completely. Eaproachet pulled me aside and whispered with an almost desperate urgency, "Mom, what are you doing here? Didn't we agree to meet at the corner?" But we hadn't agreed on anything like that, and we both knew it. That was just an excuse, a way to distance me from those friends who represented a world he wanted to belong to, and from which I, with my simple clothes and humble manner, was a constant reminder of an origin he was trying to hide. Things gradually worsened over the following years. Raphael graduated, got an excellent job at a multinational company, started earning well. Very well, actually. More in a month than I earned in an entire year of work. He moved to an apartment in an upscale neighborhood of the city, started wearing designer clothes, frequenting expensive restaurants, traveling to places I only saw on television. And the more he rose in life, the more he seemed to want to distance himself from me, as if I were a weight from the past that he needed to leave behind in order to fly. Our conversations became increasingly sparse, more superficial. He stopped visiting me, stopped calling me, responded to my messages with monosyllables when he responded, and then came the final blow. He met Mariana, his current wife, and when he introduced her to me for the first time, I knew instantly that she didn't approve of me. Mariana came from a rich family, studied in private schools all her life, went to college abroad, had that polished and cold manner of someone who never had to fight for anything in life. She looked down on me with a condescending smile on her lips, asking questions that seemed more like disguised interrogations, measuring every word I said as if evaluating whether I was worthy or not of being in her presence. The wedding was a sumptuous event at an elegant club that I could never afford to frequent. I felt completely out of place among those rich people, with their designer dresses and their gleaming jewels. I tried to talk to some guests, but it was obvious I didn't belong to that world. And worst of all, my own son seemed to agree with that. During the entire party, he barely spoke to me. He was always surrounded by Mariana's friends, work colleagues, the wife's rich relatives. I spent most of the night sitting alone at a table in the corner of the hall, smiling when someone looked in my direction. pretending everything was fine when inside my heart was breaking. At the time of the official photos, something happened that was forever marked in my memory. The photographer was organizing the family for traditional photos, and when it was my turn to enter the photo with the bride and groom, I saw Rafael and Mariana exchange a look. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I was watching and saw it clearly. She made a discreet grimace, he shrugged, and then the photographer called me. I stood there next to my son, trying to smile naturally, but feeling that immense discomfort, that feeling that I shouldn't be there, that my presence was somehow ruining the perfect moment they had planned. After the wedding, months passed, and the contact between me and Rafael became increasingly rare. He didn't invite me to see the new apartment he had bought with Mariana, didn't call me for Sunday lunches, didn't share the details of his life. I found out that Mariana was pregnant through a distant cousin who saw the news on their Instagram. Imagine the pain of a mother discovering she's going to be a grandmother through third parties, through social media, and not from her own son's mouth. I called Rafael as soon as I found out, my heart beating fast, wanting to share the joy, wanting to get closer to him in this special moment. But the conversation was cold, distant. He confirmed the pregnancy with an, "Yeah, Mom, it's true," answered my questions with short and objective answers. And when I asked if I could help with anything, if I could be present during the pregnancy, he simply said it wasn't necessary, that they had everything under control, that Mariana's mother was already helping with everything. That hurt more than anything he had said before. I was being replaced, erased, as if the years I dedicated to raising him alone, the sacrifices I made, the nights I spent awake caring for him when he was sick, none of that had any value now that he had a rich and well-connected mother-in. When Alice was born, I received a message from Mariana with a photo of the baby a few hours after birth. It was a beautiful photo. The little girl, all pink, wrapped in a light pink blanket with a tiny bow on her head. I cried when I saw that photo, cried with joy at finally being a grandmother, but I also cried with sadness, knowing that this child was miles away from me, not geographically, but emotionally. I asked when I could go to the hospital to meet my granddaughter, but the answer was evasive. "Let us get organized first. Helena, the maternity ward, is very restrictive with visits because of the pandemic." But I knew it wasn't just because of that. I knew they simply didn't want me there. And in fact, from the stories Mariana posted on social media, I saw that her mother was there all the time, holding the baby, helping with everything, while the maternal grandmother, the mother of the child's father, was completely excluded from that moment. Weeks passed, then months, and I still hadn't met my granddaughter in person. Every time I brought up the subject, Raphael came up with a different excuse. The baby had reflux. They were too tired to receive visits. It was better to wait for the vaccines. They needed to establish a routine first. There was always a reason, always a justification that made sense on the surface, but that hid the real truth. They didn't want me to be part of that child's life. And then came that devastating message I mentioned at the beginning. Those words that said I wasn't worthy of meeting my own granddaughter. I was paralyzed for several minutes after reading that, my whole body shaking, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. What do you mean I wasn't worthy? What had I done so terrible to deserve this treatment? I called Raphael immediately. my hands shaking so much I could barely hold the phone. He answered on the third ring, his voice cold and impersonal, as if he were talking to a stranger. "Hi, Mom." I couldn't even respond to the greeting. The words came out, all jumbled, mixed with sobs. "Raphael, for God's sake, what's happening? Why did you say that? Why do you think I'm not worthy of meeting my granddaughter? What did I do wrong?" On the other end of the line, there was a long, heavy silence, and then he responded with a controlled voice, almost rehearsed, as if he had prepared that speech before. "Mom, you need to understand that Mariana and I have a standard of living. We have a social position. We have a circle of friends and a reputation to uphold. The way you dress, how you speak, how you behave, ... that doesn't match the environment we're creating for our daughter. We don't want Alice to grow up with influences that could ... How can I say limit her opportunities or create confusion about what standard we expect from her?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Were those words really coming from my son's mouth, from the boy I raised, that I fed, that I clothed, that I educated with so much love and dedication? "Raphael, are you telling me I'm no good because I'm poor? Is that it? Are you ashamed of your own mother?" He sighed on the other end. That kind of impatient sigh from someone dealing with someone who doesn't understand something obvious. "It's not about being poor or rich, Mom. It's about adequacy. It's about belonging. You don't belong to our world, and that's okay. Everyone has their place in life. But I don't think it's fair to Alice to expose her to a reality that isn't hers, that could confuse her or make her feel ashamed." Those words were like stabs. Ashamed. He was worried that his daughter would be ashamed of her grandmother the same way he was ashamed of me. "And does Mariana agree with this?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Mariana understands the situation better than anyone. She grew up in an adequate environment. She knows how things work in these circles. And look, Mom, I'm not saying you're a bad person. You did the best you could with me. And I recognize that. But now I've built a different life, a better life, and I need to protect that. You understand, right?" No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how a son could turn his back on his mother like that. How he could erase all the history we lived together, all the difficulties we overcame, as if none of that had value. The conversation ended badly, with him hanging up on me when I started questioning his choices. I sat there on the couch, the phone still in my hand, feeling completely destroyed. All those nights I spent awake when he had a fever, all those lunches I skipped so he could eat, all those old shoes I continued wearing so he could have new shoes to go to school, all of that seemed to me nothing now. I had become a burden, an embarrassment, someone who needed to be kept at a distance so as not to tarnish the reputation of the family he had built. I spent days in deep depression, unable to eat properly, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything other than that brutal rejection. My neighbor, Donna Amelia, who has known me for years, became worried when she stopped seeing me watering the plants on the balcony as I did every morning. She knocked on my door on a Thursday afternoon, bringing a cake she had made, and when I opened the door and she saw my face swollen from crying so much, my disheveled hair, my neglected appearance, She didn't need to ask anything. She came in, sat next to me and hugged me while I broke down once again, telling everything that had happened between sobs. Donna Amelia listened to everything in silence, holding my hand, and when I finished speaking, she thought for a while before saying, "Helena, have you told your son about that matter, about what you've been doing all these years?" I shook my head negatively. No, I had never told him. It was my secrets, something I kept to myself all these years, because I never thought it was necessary or appropriate to reveal. But maybe Donna Amelia was right. Maybe the time had come for Raphael to know the complete truth about his mother, about the woman he considered unworthy of meeting her own granddaughter. "I don't know if it will change anything," I replied, my voice tired. He's already decided who I am in his head. But Donna Amelia insisted, "You need to at least try, dear. You need to give him the chance to know the truth. Then, if even so he doesn't change his mind, then you'll know you did everything you could." She was right. I needed to try one last time. Needed to put all the cards on the table, reveal everything I had hidden for so long, and let Raphael decide, based on the complete truth, not just on the superficial appearances that were guiding him now. Let me tell you then about this secret that changed everything. After Jorge died and I found myself alone with Raphael to raise, without money, without support, without prospects, I did what any mother would do. I started looking for ways to survive. The job as an administrative assistant paid very little, barely enough to cover basic expenses, and I lived in distress, always owing something, always late on some bill. It was at that time that I met Donna Gloria, an elegant lady who frequented the company where I worked as a client. She was always very kind to me, always treated me with respect and politeness, unlike some other clients who barely looked at my face. One day, she stopped me in the hallway and asked if I could have coffee with her after work. Said she wanted to talk about an opportunity. I was curious and a little apprehensive, but I accepted. We met at a simple cafe near the company, and it was there that Donna Gloria told me about the job she was looking for someone to do. She owned a charitable foundation that helped underprivileged children, offering education, food, cultural activities, all free. The foundation was growing, and she needed someone to help with the administrative part, someone organized, reliable, discreet. The salary was almost double what I earned, and she even offered help with some extra expenses. It was an incredible opportunity, almost too good to be true. I accepted immediately. Of course, I started working at the foundation a few weeks later, juggling with my old job for the first few months until I could completely disengage and dedicate myself only to the foundation. The work was challenging but rewarding. I helped organize charity events, manage donations, take care of the bureaucratic part, bridge between the foundation and the institutions we served. And the most incredible thing, I started meeting people, important people, influential people, people I would never have met working as an administrative assistant in an accounting firm. I met businessmen, politicians, artists, all involved in some way with the foundation, either as donors or as supporters of the cause. Over the years, I gained Donna Gloria's trust and took on more responsibilities. When she passed away, about 5 years ago, she left in her will that I should assume the executive direction of the foundation. I couldn't believe it. A simple woman like me, without higher education, without connections, was being put in charge of one of the most respected foundations in the city. But I accepted the challenge. And in these last years, I worked tirelessly to honor Donna Gloria's memory and expand the foundation's work. Here's the crucial point that Raphael never knew. Over these years, working at the foundation, I achieved a financial stability I never had before in my life. The salary was excellent. I received some personal donations from people grateful for the work we did, and I even managed to make some investments that yielded. Well, today, I have a comfortable financial situation, much more than Raphael imagines. But I always kept a discreet profile, continued living in the same simple apartment, continued dressing in simple clothes, continued leading a modest life because I never cared much about ostentation or status. For me, what was always important was doing good, helping those in need, honoring Jorge's memory by raising our son with dignity. Money was just a means to live peacefully, not an end in itself. But beyond the financial issue, there was something even more significant that Raphael was completely unaware of: my network of contacts. Over these years working with the foundation, I personally met governors, mayors, state secretaries, directors of large companies, opinion makers, people with real power to change things and influence decisions. I had access to circles that Raphael, even with all his professional success, probably would never have, and more. These people genuinely respected me, not because of money or social position, but because of the serious work I did, because of the real impact the foundation had on the lives of hundreds of children. But why did I never tell Raphael any of this? That's the question many people might ask. The answer is complicated, full of nuances. First, because when he started distancing himself from me, still at the beginning of college, I thought it was just a phase, something temporary, and that soon he would come back to seek me out, to value our relationship. I thought it wasn't necessary to use my position or my achievements to prove my worth to him. A mother shouldn't need credentials to be loved and respected by her son, right? Second, because I always believed in true humility. I saw so many people in the world of philanthropy who use social work only as a platform for self-promotion, to build a favorable public image, to open doors in the business or political world. I never wanted to be that person. My work at the foundation was always motivated by a genuine desire to help, to give back the blessings I received in life even amid difficulties, to make some difference in the world. And third, because I had hope that Raphael would eventually mature, that life would teach him that a person's value is not in their bank account, in designer clothes, or in the address where they live, but in character, in integrity, in the ability to love and be loved. Apparently, I was wrong in that hope. But now, after that cruel message, after being considered unworthy of meeting my own granddaughter, I knew I needed to do something. Not out of pride, not to get revenge or humiliate my son, but because he needed to understand that he was making a terrible mistake, that he was depriving his daughter of knowing a grandmother who could add a lot to her life, and that he was throwing away a relationship that should be precious based on superficial and prejudiced values. So, a few days after that disastrous phone conversation, I picked up my phone and wrote a long message to Raphael. I didn't mention anything about the foundation or my real situation. Instead, I made a simple invitation. Raphael, there are many things about me you don't know. Things I never thought necessary to mention, because I believed our mother and son love was beyond anything else. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe you need to know some truths before making definitive decisions that can affect not only our relationship, but also Alice's future. I'm organizing an event next week, a charity dinner for the foundation where I work. I would very much like you and Mariana to attend. You don't need to give me an answer now. I'll send the official invitation by email. I just ask that you consider it. I sent the message and waited, my heart tight. Hours passed without a response. Then, late at night, my phone vibrated. It was Raphael. What foundation? You never mentioned anything about working at a foundation, I replied. It's a long story, son. Come to the event and I'll tell you everything. The following days were of intense anxiety. I didn't know if Raphael and Mariana would show up. Part of me doubted, thought they would simply ignore the invitation. But another part had a stubborn hope that curiosity would be stronger. The event was scheduled for a Friday night at a 5-star hotel in the city center. It would be the foundation's annual gala dinner, an event that brought together more than 300 people, including donors, partners, authorities, and press. I was nervous not only about the possibility of Raphael showing up, but also because it would be the night we would announce the launch of a new foundation project, a vocational school for young people from underprivileged communities. An ambitious project that had taken 2 years of planning, and that represented the consolidation of all the work we had done until then. On Thursday, one day before the event, I received an email confirming attendance. It was from Raphael's email. They would come. My heart raced. Was I doing the right thing? Was exposing my life this way, revealing what I had kept private for so long, really necessary? I talked to my therapist that afternoon. A professional I started seeing a few months earlier when the situation with Raphael began to seriously affect my mental health. She helped me process my feelings, to understand that I wasn't doing this out of vanity or revenge, but out of love, out of a genuine desire to reconnect with my son and to be able to be part of my granddaughter's life. The night of the event arrived. I spent the entire afternoon getting ready, chose an elegant but discreet dress, had my hair and makeup done at a salon, not because I wanted to impress anyone with my appearance, but because I wanted to feel confident, strong to face what was to come. I arrived at the hotel early, as I always did at foundation events, to supervise the final details, check if everything was perfect. The hall was beautiful. Tables decorated with white flowers and candles. Soft lighting creating an elegant but welcoming atmosphere. A stage set up in front with the foundation's logo projected on a huge screen. Guests began arriving around 7 in the evening. I was at the entrance of the hall greeting people, thanking them for their presence, when I saw Raphael and Mariana entering. His face was a mixture of confusion and curiosity. She seemed slightly bored, as if she were there only because her husband insisted. They saw me at the entrance, and Raphael frowned, clearly surprised to see me there in that position, greeting illustrious guests, being treated with deference by the event organizers. Evento, tot in my heart. beating hard. "Hi, son? Mariana? I'm glad you came." Raphael looked around, then at me, then around again. "Mom, what? Do you work here? Are you one of the organizers?" I smiled. "Something like that. Come, let me introduce you to some people." Over the next hour, before dinner officially began, I led Raphael and Mariana through the hall, introducing them to various important people who were there. I introduced them to the city's mayor and his wife, two state deputies, to the director of one of the country's largest technology companies, to the Federal University rector, to a famous actress who was the foundation's godmother. With each introduction, I saw Raphael's expression changing, confusion giving way to growing astonishment. Mariana, who had entered the event with that air of superiority, was now visibly disconcerted, trying to process how that simple woman she had so despised knew and was respected by such influential people. But the decisive moment came when we sat down for dinner and, after the main course was served, it was time for the speeches. The master of ceremonies went up on stage and began to talk about the foundation, about the institution's history, about the work we developed, about the impact we had caused in the lives of so many children and young people over the years. Then he said, "And now, I would like to call to the stage the person responsible for keeping alive the mission of this foundation, the woman who for the last 5 years has led this institution with wisdom, dedication, and love. Please, welcome with a round of applause our executive director, Helena Santos." I felt all eyes turn to me as I stood up. I looked at Raphael, who had his mouth literally opened, his eyes wide with shock. Mariana was pale, her hand holding the cloth napkin visibly trembling. I walked to the stage under the warm applause of 300 people, climbed the steps, took the microphone, and for a moment just breathed, looking at all those people, feeling the weight of that moment. Then I began to speak. I spoke about the foundation, about the mission we had to transform lives through education and love. I spoke about Donna Gloria and the legacy she left. I spoke about the projects we developed, the lives we touched, the dreams we helped realize. I spoke about the new vocational school we would inaugurate next month, a project that would benefit 500 young people per year, offering quality courses, excellent teachers, and connections with companies to guarantee real job opportunities. And then, looking directly at Raphael, I spoke about motivation. You know why I do this work? Why I dedicate my life to helping children and young people who often have nothing, who come from poor families, from forgotten communities, because I know what that is. I lived that. After losing my husband very young, I found myself completely alone, without money, without support, with a small child to raise. I worked hard. Very hard, went through difficulties I never wish on anyone, but I never lost my dignity, never lost my faith, never lost my love, and I learned a fundamental lesson. A person's value is not in the money they have, in the clothes they wear, in the neighborhood where they live. The value is in character, in kindness, in the ability to love and care about others. These children and young people we help are no less worthy of respect, of opportunities, of love, just because they were born poor, and no one will ever be unworthy of being loved simply for not having money or social status. The silence in the hall was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. I continued. I could have used my position here, my contacts, my resources, to impress people, to open doors, to gain recognition, but I chose discretion. I chose humility. I chose to do the work without seeking spotlights, because what matters is not how others see me, but how I see myself when I look in the mirror every day. And when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who did the best she could with what she had, who raised a wonderful son alone, despite all the difficulties, who dedicated her life to making a difference in the world. And that woman, regardless of anything else, is worthy. She is worthy of respect, of recognition, of love. Especially of the love of the son she raised with so much sacrifice. Tears streamed down my face as I spoke, but my voice remained firm. I didn't look at Raphael again after that moment. I finished my speech talking about the Foundation's future plans, thanked everyone for their presence and support, and returned to my seat under deafening applause. Many people standing, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. When I sat down, I didn't look at Raphael. I couldn't. I was afraid of what I would see on his face. The rest of the event passed in a blur. There were more speeches, an emotional video showing testimonials from young people who benefited from the foundation, an auction of items donated by companies and artists to raise funds, live music. I tried to focus on all of this, on talking to guests, on fulfilling my role as hostess, but my mind was on Raphael sitting at that table a few meters away, processing everything he had discovered. When the event finally ended, around midnight, I started saying goodbye to people, thanking them once again for their presence. Many praised my speech, said it was touching, inspiring, that they admired me even more after hearing my story. I accepted the compliments with gratitude, but honestly, the only person whose opinion I cared about at that moment was my son. I was gathering my things to leave when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, and it was Raphael. His face was red, his eyes swollen. It was obvious he had been crying. Beside him, Mariana looked like a statue, completely disconcerted, not knowing how to react. "Mom?" Raphael began. His voice choked. I didn't know any of this. Why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked into his eyes, those same eyes I used to look into when he was little, when the world for him was simple, and his mother was his heroine. Because a mother shouldn't need an impressive resume or a full bank account to be loved and respected by her son. Because I thought you loved me for who I am, not for what I have or for the people I know. Apparently, I was wrong. He shook his head, tears falling freely now. "No, Mom, you weren't wrong. I was an idiot, a terrible son, a terrible human being. How could I say those horrible things to you? How could I consider you unworthy? When you're the most worthy person I know." He fell to his knees in front of me, right there in the middle of the empty hall, with only a few staff members still arranging things around. "Forgive me, Mom. Please, forgive me. Forgive all the arrogance, all the ingratitude, all the cruelty. I was blind, completely blind. I let superficial values, money, Other people's opinions transform me into someone I don't recognize anymore. But I swear I'll change. I swear I'll be the son you deserve." I knelt beside him and hugged him. That tight mother's hug from a mother who hasn't hugged her son for far too long. "I forgive you, son. I will always forgive. But more important than my forgiveness is you forgiving yourself. Is you recognizing the mistakes and really changing. Not for me, but for yourself. For Alice. For the person you want to be." We stayed there, embracing for a time that seemed eternal. When we finally separated, I looked at Mariana, who was still standing there, looking completely lost. I extended my hand to her. "Mariana, I know we started off on the wrong foot. I know you may have had a wrong impression of me, influenced perhaps by what Raphael said or by the difference in our lifestyles. But I would like you to know that I never had anything against you. All I ever wanted was to be part of my granddaughter's life, not to cause problems or confusion, but to offer love, to be present, to be the grandmother that every child deserves to have." She stared at my hand for a moment, and then, to my surprise, she started crying. She didn't take my hand. She hugged me. "I'm sorry, Helena. Sorry for judging you, for treating you badly, for supporting Raphael in all this madness. I grew up in an environment where appearances were everything, where what you had defined who you were. But today, seeing you up there on stage, hearing your story, seeing how all those people respect you not for your money but for your character, for your work, for the difference you make in the world, ... It made me question everything I always believed. It made me see how unfair I was, how cruel I was. I hugged her back, feeling that maybe, finally, we were beginning to build something real, something based on mutual respect and not on prejudices. The conversation continued right there in the hall, the three of us sitting at one of the tables, talking for hours about everything. About the past, about mistakes, about hurts, about the future. Raphael told me about the pressures he felt at work, about how the culture of the company where he worked valued appearances and status so much that he ended up internalizing those values without questioning. He told me about how colleagues mocked those who came from humble origins, about how there was a constant game of showing who had more wok in your womb, who frequented the right places, and he, wanting to fit in, wanting to be accepted, gradually let these toxic values shape his worldview. Mariana also opened up, told me about her own childhood, about absent parents who compensated for their absence with expensive gifts and luxurious lives, about how she had never had true emotional intimacy with anyone, because everything in her life was superficial, performative. She said that when she saw my speech, when she saw the genuine emotion of people reacting to the words that came from my heart, she realized how empty her own life was, how much she had focused on the wrong things. I listened to everything attentively, with compassion, because I realized that my son and daughter-in-law were, in a way, victims too. Victims of a system that teaches people to value the wrong things, to measure success and worth by the wrong criteria. When we finally said goodbye that night, or rather, that early morning already, because it was almost 3 a.m, Raphael made me a promise. "Mom, starting tomorrow, I want you to be part of Alice's life. I want you to visit her whenever you want. I want you to be the grandmother I know you can be. And more than that, I want to rebuild our relationship. I want to be your son again for real, not this selfish and arrogant stranger I became." I held his face between my hands and said, "You have always been my son, Rafael. Rafael, even in the most difficult moments, even when you rejected me, even when you said those terrible words, you never stopped being my son. And now we're going to rebuild together, slowly, one day at a time." We embraced once more, and when we finally separated and each went to their car, I felt a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a magical solution. I knew that. I knew we would still have a lot of work ahead, many difficult conversations, many adjustments to make. But for the first time in a long time, I had hope. In the following days, Raphael called me every day. Long, real conversations, where we talked about everything we had never talked about before. He told me about his insecurities, about the fear of not being good enough, about how he used money and status as armor to protect himself from these fears. I told him about my own journey, about how I built the foundation, about the incredible people I met, about the work that gave me purpose and meaning. And then, on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after the event, I received a message from him. "Mom, can you come have lunch at our place today? There's someone who's dying to meet you." My heart raced. I knew he was talking about Alice. I packed a bag with some gifts I had bought for my granddaughter over the months, imagining a day when I would finally meet her, and went to their apartment. When Raphael opened the door, he had Alice in his arms. The little girl was awake, her curious little eyes looking at everything around, a small hand gripping her father's finger. She was even more beautiful in person than in photos. "Mom," Raphael said, his voice emotional, "this is Alice." "Alice, this is your grandma, Helena." He placed the baby in my arms, and when I felt the weight of that child against my chest, when I looked at that perfect little face, the tears came without control. She was my granddaughter, finally in my arms, finally real, finally mine. I spent that entire afternoon with them. Mariana prepared the delicious lunch. We ate together like a real family, talking, laughing, sharing stories. After lunch, while Mariana washed the dishes, I sat on the couch with Alice, singing the same lullabies I used to sing to Raphael when he was a baby. He sat beside me, his head on my shoulder, watching his mother and daughter finally together. "You know, Mom," he said softly, "I was talking to the company's human resources department this week. I asked to be transferred to another sector, a sector where the culture is less toxic, where people value real work and not just appearances. And you know what else?" Mariana and I were thinking, does the foundation need volunteer lawyers? Because I would like to help. I would like to be part of this work you do, to contribute to something that really matters. I looked at him, surprised and moved. "Really? You would do that?" He nodded. "I want Alice to grow up seeing her father doing things that matter, being a person she can be proud of, not just someone who makes money and shows off. I want to be like you, Mom. I want to have your values, your integrity, your kindness." I hugged him with only one arm, because the other was still holding Alice, and I felt that everything I had been through, all the pain, all the difficulties had been worth it to reach that moment. Today, 6 months after that transformative night, I can say that I have my son back. Raphael really changed. It wasn't just talk. He really transferred to another sector in the company, started doing volunteer work at the foundation, even brought some co-workers to see our projects, and some became regular donors. Mariana also changed. She's doing therapy to work on her issues, and has shown herself to be a loving and considerate daughter-in-law. She even started asking me for advice about motherhood, about how I raised Raphael alone, and our conversations have become increasingly deep and meaningful. As for Alice, she's growing up beautiful and healthy, and I have the privilege of being part of her life. I go to their house twice a week. Sometimes they come to my apartment. We spend Sundays together, vacations together. She's still too young to understand, but one day I'll tell my granddaughter about this story, about how we almost didn't meet, about how pride and wrong values almost destroyed our family, but about how love and truth finally prevailed. And I haven't changed anything about myself. I continue living in the same apartment, wearing simple clothes, leading a discreet life, because I learned that we don't need to prove anything to anyone, that our value doesn't come from outside but from inside, and that the most important things in life, love, family, purpose, cannot be bought or shown off. If you've made it this far in this story, I want to ask you some questions to reflect on. Have you ever distanced yourself from someone because of prejudices about social status or money? Have you ever judged someone by appearances without truly knowing the person? Have you ever let superficial values guide your decisions and relationships? Because all of us, on some level, are affected by this culture that values having more than being, that measures people by what they have and not by what they are. The story I told is not just mine. It's about so many people who are judged, despised, considered unworthy simply because they don't fit the superficial standards that society imposes. But let me tell you a truth. Dignity has no price. Dignity is not in your bank account. It's not in the car you drive. It's not in the neighborhood where you live. Dignity is in character, in integrity, in kindness, in the ability to love and do good even when no one is watching. And every person, absolutely every person, regardless of origin, financial situation, or social status, is worthy of respect, of love, of opportunities. Don't let prejudices prevent you from meeting incredible people, from building real relationships, from seeing the real value that exists in every human being. Now tell me in the comments, what did you think of this story? Have you been through something similar? How do you deal with social pressures related to money and status? I would love to read your reflections. So leave your comment down below. And if this story touched you in some way, if it made you reflect, or if it moved you, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories I'm going to share. A heartfelt hug to each of you, and always remember, you are worthy of love and respect, no matter what the world says.